If you're a competitive gamer with a high budget looking to buy a new monitor, you're probably looking at one of the following. An OLED monitor like this one, an IPS monitor with a new NVIDIA Pulsar technology like this one, or you're one of the very few extremely sweaty competitive grinders still looking at a TN panel in the big 2026. Well, today we're gonna look at just that with the latest release of ZOWIE, the XQ2566X, which comes with several improvements over their previous models, such as DyAc 3, a 1440p resolution at 24 inches, color filters specifically made for Battle Royale esports titles, a brand new app called ZOWIE Sync for your phone, and much more. As someone who's been OLED pilled for years, I have 3 questions that I want answered by the end of this video. What is it like using this thing as your main monitor? Is DyAc 3 a noticeable upgrade over OLED? And who is this monitor for? As a quick disclaimer, this monitor was sent out to me by ZOWIE, and whilst I really appreciate the opportunity for being able to check it out, my opinions remain my own, and this will not be a sponsored video. I also want to mention that this is my first monitor review ever, so it'll probably be pretty different from others that you see here on YouTube, especially because I don't have any proper testing equipment. So my main focus will be on the parts that really matter, which is how this monitor is to main on a daily basis and what it's like coming from an OLED panel. ZOWIE has been in the esports monitor scene for about 16 years already. It was until 2015 when they got acquired by BenQ, but they had already worked with them together before on a 120-inch TN panel back in 2010. Ever since then, ZOWIE monitors have been the #1 choice of professional players, and even if you look at ProSettings.net right now, there's not a single monitor that is not a ZOWIE in the top 5. As an OLED enjoyer who has used this LG 240Hz panel for 1 year, and now this ASUS 480Hz panel for the past 2 years, I simply couldn't understand why anyone would buy a TN panel in the big 2026. 1.5 months ago, I was invited by ZOWIE to attend the IM Cologne and their ZOWIE Day to check out some of their new releases, where this XQ2566X was the main star of the show. And there I had my questions answered to why pros haven't swapped to OLED yet. They said that ZOWIE listens to the pros because they are who they cater to, and to emphasize that, they also told us that at BenQ they can make anything they want. Since BenQ is owned by Kista and they are capable of making any panel that they want, with a ZOWIE representative saying that they can simply change to OLED if they wanted to, whilst other brands like ASUS need to buy their panel from Samsung or LG. And just for reference, Kista made a total of $6.7 billion of revenue last year. They also told me that ZOWIE is open to all types of panels, but for the time being, the vast majority of their pro audience that they listen to and gather feedback from still wants TN. I'm still unsure whether or not I want to believe that pros know exactly what they want, and I also think that many pros, especially in the Counter-Strike scene, absolutely hate changing their peripherals. Well, let's see what this thing is like after only using OLED panels for the past 3 years. Getting into the unboxing experience, here's what you get. You get a DisplayPort cable, you get an HDMI cable, you of course also get the power cable, you get this puck that you can actually use to control the monitor OSD, and you can also use those 3 buttons to hot swap between your profiles. As some feedback to ZOWIE here, I wish that you could swap between your main profiles a bit more easily, or maybe even have a holder for the puck on the back of the monitor. You of course get these signature ZOWIE hoods for the left and right side of the monitor to block off any light or the audience in the background if you're playing on stage. And as you can see, they are now magnetic. Here's what the stand looks like. It goes up and down very far. You also have 35 degrees of tilt, and you can also pivot it from the left to the right a fair amount to get the stand out of the way of your mousepad. It has cable management on the back, and it even has this nifty handle for transporting the monitor. Looking at the back on the screen, here's your knob for controlling the OSD. There's an input, a power button, and there's also a toggle for Bluetooth, which we will get into pretty soon. And over here on the right side, you have a headphone jack, some HDMI ports, and also a display port that is 1.4. And unfortunately, you will have to use display stream compression no matter what if you do want to play 1440p at 360 Hz. Whilst this is pretty much the best monitor stand that I have ever seen, I would still take a solid monitor arm over a stand that gets in your way when placing your peripherals on your desk. Because with a monitor arm, you will never have to adjust your ergonomics around a monitor stand. You also get this headset hanger on the back of the monitor. And as you can see, it is a chonker. It is even thicker than your previous monitors, and that is because of their full array mini LED backlight. Getting into the monitor itself, let's start with the basics. The model I have here, which is the XQ2566X, is a 24.1 inch 1440p 360Hz fast TN panel. There is also a 27-inch equivalent version of this monitor called the XQ2766X, which is the exact same but bigger and a lot more expensive. 1440p already looks super crisp on a 26.5-inch panel like my OLED here, but on a smaller panel like this one, the pixel density goes from about 111 to 122 pixels per inch, which is somewhat noticeable and really nice for battle royale titles like Fortnite, Apex, or PUBG, and any other game where a large portion of your gameplay consists of spotting or shooting targets at range. Fun fact, back in 2017, I actually swapped from a 24-inch 1080p panel to the 27-inch 1440p XL2730 from ZOWIE only because of PUBG, and it legit was such an improvement since almost all fights are long distance in that game, where your enemies can be as small as a few pixels. Besides the resolution, the main talking point is DyAc 3. Instead of using a dual edge backlighting like on their previous DyAc 2 panels, DyAc 3 now introduces a full array direct mini LED backlight. In theory, this improves motion clarity even further, since with the edge lighting, light would have to travel across the panel, which could introduce strobing that isn't perfectly uniform. Whereas with the new multi-domain backlighting that comes directly from behind the panel, the strobing is supposed to be a lot more consistent. Now, I don't have a DyAc 2 monitor to compare this to, and even if I had, I wouldn't even know how to record the difference to show to you guys without a slider. But here's a direct comparison from a reliable reviewer based in China that is great at making these types of tests. The main benefit that I spotted personally was that there's only a very minimal amount of backlight bleed present, which is definitely nice to see considering that this is a TN panel. And if you want my thoughts and opinions on DyAc 3 and how it compares to an OLED monitor in-game, definitely stay tuned for later in this video. The Battle Royale zone color filters are one of the main selling points of this monitor as well. With these filters, you can much more easily see your enemies through something like the red ring in Apex Legends, the blue storm in Fortnite, or the blue zone over in PUBG. And as you can see by the comparison on screen, it absolutely works. It does fade out the rest of your screen a bit and makes your colors less vibrant if you turn the filter up to the max. But if you set it to about 5 out of 10 in terms of how strong the color filter is, you can have the benefits of that see-through effect on the zone whilst not washing out your colors completely. One of the main reasons you'd ever want a ZOWIE monitor are of course these color filters, and now also these new Battle Royale zone filters. But the ZOWIE Sync app is also a new feature which enables you to hot swap between all your profiles on your phone. And for each of these 3 profiles that you can customize, you can go to the settings and configure absolutely everything so that you never have to touch the OSD on your monitor ever again. You simply tap your monitor with your phone and it automatically connects via Bluetooth. And here you can set DyAc 3 all the way up to premium or high. You have your brightness options, the black equalizer, the color vibrance, which is really nice. Where I, for example, for my rivals profile here, set the yellow a bit higher so that I can more easily see the outline of my enemies because I do set it to yellow. You have your contrast setting, the color filters, which are for the Battle Royale zones like Blue Storm for Fortnite, Blue Zone for PUBG, and Red Ring for Apex. You have the sharpness setting up here, gamma, AMA, which I just recommend setting to high, else you might get some overshoot, and the color temperature, which is also fully customizable inside of the app as well. For each profile, you can either reset it, save it, give it a name, and then inside of your files, you can go to personal, saved, and see all of the profiles that you have ever made. And from here, you can build up your own library if you want to test new profiles. Click on a profile, apply, and then set it directly onto the monitor. This is pretty sick because you no longer have to use the software on your desktop and also connect a USB cable. You also don't have to use the puck or the OSD. You can simply use your phone. They also have many different official profiles that they have calibrated together in their lab and together with their pros. And in the future, you will also be able to import pro settings directly from the pros. In the Chinese version of this app, this actually already works. and I hope they will bring it to the rest of the world very soon. They also now have an indicator for the tilt angle directly on the OSD, so that you can be more consistent with the exact angle that you want on your monitor. The input you will want to be using for this monitor is DisplayPort 1.4, which does mean that you will have to run display stream compression to get your 360Hz on this 1440p panel no matter what. But I'm happy to announce that inside of the product listing of this monitor in the download section, you can download the ZOWIE driver, and inside of that folder, they actually provide you with a color filter for Windows, which is this ICM file. Simply go to your desktop, right-click, display settings, click on color profile, add as SDR profile, and select the .icm file that you just downloaded in order to add the color profile for your monitor, and then make sure that it is set as system default. Whilst you add it, also disable automatically manage color for apps. And if you want to learn more about how Windows fucks up your monitor's colors, check out this awesome video from Tekkusai to learn more about it. The first thing that I noticed when swapping to this monitor were the viewing angles. I knew they'd be bad on TN, but I fully forgot just how bad it actually is as soon as you're not looking slightly downward at the panel. I'm sure their previous iterations were worse than this one since they didn't have the direct multi-domain backlight that this new panel does. But coming from OLED, this was pretty shocking during normal desktop use. In fact, it was so bad that I had to buy a new monitor arm that allowed for on-the-fly tilting, which is the Ergotron LX Pro that I can comfortably recommend so far. It ticks all the boxes, and I'll leave a link down in the description below for you guys. While you're in-game, the bad viewing angles are not as noticeable since you're mainly looking at the center of the screen, but since I use my monitor for both work and play, this would be a deal breaker for me personally if I were contemplating on buying one myself. The second thing I noticed was the clarity. And when I say clarity, I don't just mean the improved pixel density on this 24.1 inch panel, because especially when looking at solid colors, OLED grain and banding is definitely a thing, especially on the tandem OLED with gray banding. And it is very noticeable when comparing it side by side to the ZOWIE TN panel. That is simply not a thing with TN, and it was a really nice change. And the third thing I noticed was that this monitor is just so much easier on the eyes. I had to get prescription glasses with prisms and blue light filters because my OLED monitor started giving me crazy eye strain last year. But with this monitor, I could even use it without glasses, and my eyes have always felt comfortable looking at it, even with DyAc 3 set to premium. That being said, backlight strobing technologies like DyAc can introduce headaches or migraines for certain people. But I'd honestly say that this lack of eye strain for me personally was one of the main strong suits of this monitor. And even if you're an aspiring pro player or someone who grinds competitively for many hours a day, I could definitely see this being an advantage. The colors I really didn't mind on the ZOWIE panel. Obviously, they're not going to be nearly as accurate as OLED, and the contrast will be vastly inferior. But for gaming, the color popped more than enough for me with their color vibrance setting. In terms of latency, I simply don't have the tools nor the interest to do a direct comparison, but if you want my subjective opinion, well, I simply couldn't feel a difference personally. OLED will always win the title of having the lowest response times, but ZOWIE's fast TN panel does come very close at a theoretical 0.5 milliseconds of grade-to-grade response time. But since we're talking about fractions of a millisecond here, let's talk about something that actually matters. How is the perceived motion clarity, and can you feel a difference when comparing it to an OLED panel? Well, first of all, let's state the facts. OLED is sample and hold, which means that the displayed image is being held until the next one comes. This means that you'll have to push a really high refresh rate and frame rate to minimize the perceived motion blur, and even when doing so, theoretically you can't come close to something like a strobing technique here with DyAc 3. But that's the theoretical side of things. How is it when I actually compare it myself in person? But from all of the gameplay experience that I've had with both my OLED monitor and the ZOWIE XQ2566X so far, I can barely tell them apart from each other. When it comes to just straight up motion clarity, the only real difference that I can see between these two panels is like from the Blurbuster test that the alien's eyes are ever so slightly sharper over with DyAc 3 Premium enabled. And that is with my OLED set to 480Hz and my ZOWIE panel set to 360Hz. When I do limit my OLED to 360Hz, the eyes of the alien get a tiny bit less sharp. And as I've already just mentioned, you need to reach a really high refresh rate and also frame rate inside of your game to be able to get close to that sharpness that you get with strobing on DyAc 3. And no matter if I set it to ELMB 240Hz, or even if I just have it uncapped with no VSync on 480Hz, I can just not tell a difference in game. I feel like I'm absolutely going insane testing these things just because the difference is so minimal that I cannot believe that DyAc 3 will give you an actual advantage in-game for a normal human being if you're already playing on an OLED that is 480Hz or higher in a game like Valorant where you can easily push 480 FPS or more. However, if you mainly play games that actually do fall below 360 FPS, I can see DyAc being quite the advantage. But for all games where you can easily suffice the 480Hz on an OLED monitor or higher, I simply think that that is the better choice for most people. Getting into the conclusion of my review, let's start with answering the 3 questions that I asked during the intro. First of all, what is it like using it as your main monitor? Well, for desktop or work usage, it is probably the worst monitor you could buy right now. But as soon as you're in game, most issues disappear and the panel shines where it has to. 1440p at 24.1 inches is awesome. TN is super clear and easy to look at, and if I cared about nothing but competitive gaming, I could actually see myself preferring this over OLED for a few reasons, with the lack of eye straining being one of the main ones for me personally. Their app is sick and makes it super easy to dial in the perfect profile for your specific needs in the games that you play. And the Battle Royale zone filters genuinely work and help me with spotting enemies outside of the blue zone on Fortnite especially. And for the second question, is DyAc 3 a noticeable upgrade over OLED? Well, to quote Source Gaming from his video where he compared DyAc 2 to G-Sync Pulsar and also OLED monitors, this type of ZOWIE panel is only for people who play for money. To mere mortals like us, the difference is so minimal that it simply can't be justified over the withdrawals that TN panels come with, especially with the viewing angles, the poor contrast, and the hefty price tag of 950 euros. I can barely spot a difference, and when I look very close on a blur test or swipe side by side with both monitors next to each other, it is difficult to spot the very slight additional motion blur on the OLED panel. But when looking at reviews from other people, it is certainly an improvement over DyAc 2, and if you love ZOWIE and TN, I could see this being quite worth the upgrade, with the better resolution that you get at 24 inches now as well. And diving right into the last question, who is this monitor for? I'd say that this is a great fit for those who want a 24-inch clear, sharp panel that is easy to look at and only play competitive games on a daily basis and don't use their monitor for anything else. It is also for those people who mainly play Battle Royale titles like Fortnite, PUBG, Apex Legends, and Delta Force for those zone filters that can provide you with an advantage. And if you want any of the awesome ZOWIE color filters, it certainly is worth looking at as long as you got a baller budget. In the current state of the market, this is really as niche as a monitor could possibly get. And I would say that for anyone outside of that specific bubble, they'd more than likely be happier using something like a high refresh rate tandem W OLED panel as long as you don't get any gray banding. For the time being, I would either recommend you to wait for an RGB stripe panel in the dimensions and resolution and refresh rate that you would like. You could also go for a regular W OLED panel. And if you want a 24-inch unit, there's a 1080p one from Asus coming up very soon. But if you don't want to spend $1,000 on a monitor, I would recommend you to probably go for an IPS panel with NVIDIA G-Sync Pulsar support and save quite a bit of money at the same time. But yeah, as my ZOWIE rep told me, ZOWIE is a brand that will sacrifice everything for a single pixel of advantage, and that's how serious they are about esports. But what I'd really love to see would be someone like ZOWIE coming up with a new technology to improve motion clarity on OLED, to make it as good of a panel as it could possibly be without having to hit those insanely high refresh and frame rates, to minimize the perceived motion clarity as much as possible. That's about it for this review though. I really hope you could bear through watching it. Definitely let me know your thoughts and feedback in the comments below, since this is my first monitor review ever and I probably have a lot to improve upon. And if you want a super in-depth review of this monitor with more technical data, although in Chinese, I can highly recommend checking out the review down in the description below from Wild PC Builder. Thanks again to ZOWIE for providing me with a sample. I really appreciate them giving me this opportunity. And thanks to all my members and subscribers over on Twitch. And if you're watching this video as it's going live, I'm probably live streaming over on Twitch right now. So come step by over at twitch.tv/JQFBS. And I hope to see you over there and also here again for the next video. Peace out.